landscape of abandoned office buildings, stores, and churches. Rather than spend money it didn't have to tear them down, Gary rented the locations to crews filming post-apocalyptic and horror movies, including A Nightmare on Elm Street and Transformers. Even a scene from the miniseries Chernobyl was filmed there. Crime spiked, and Gary's population dropped to 69,000 from a high of 177,000 in 1960. Billboards along the steel mill's southern border reflect a population that had lost its moorings. "Shackled by lust, Jesus sets you free," reads one, followed by ads for a strip club, an injury attorney, and a casino. The year 2014, however, brought Gary's steelworkers a glimmer of hope. The company's new chief executive, Mario Longhi, hired an elite consulting firm, McKinsey Company, to inject new ideas into the aging manufacturer. For decades, McKinsey sold clients on its reputation as a firm that delivered scientific solutions to complex problems. Blue-chip companies and governments around the world hired its consultants, as did the CIA, the FBI, and the Pentagon, among others, believing McKinsey had the wisdom and wherewithal that their managers lacked. McKinsey came to U.S. Steel with the goal of restoring the steelmaker to its iconic status as a company that built the nation's bridges, buildings, and weapons that defeated America's enemies. With McKinsey's help, U.S. Steel promised to recapture that spirit through a relentless focus on economic profit, our customers, cost structure, and innovation, all without sacrificing safety or harming the environment. Gary's labor force had little idea of what to expect from these highly paid consultants, some graduates of Ivy League business schools. But steelworkers would learn soon enough, as did others before them, what can happen when McKinsey comes to town. Construction on U.S. Steel's Gary plant had begun in 1906 under the direction of the company's chairman, Elbert Gary, a former judge who wanted the city to bear his name, though he did not want to live there himself. Called a dour moralist by one historian, Judge Gary cared less about the welfare of residents than about the efficiency and profitability of his steel mill. Judge Gary sought out European royalty and collected Renaissance art while steelworkers were stuck living in the Patch, a raw, disease-infected district that had 200 saloons with names like Bucket of Blood. They worked 12-hour days, 7 days a week. A church group called this 84-hour work week a disgrace to civilization, and the Congressional Committee termed it a brutal system of industrial slavery. Judge Gary didn't much care. He opposed unions, considered labor leaders his social inferiors, and believed his employees preferred to work as many hours as possible. The founder of McKinsey Company, James O. McKinsey, an accountant from the Ozarks, also believed in efficiency and profits. His young company began advising U.S. Steel in the Great Depression. The company quickly became the firm's biggest client. More than 40 consultants were assigned to the account. At one point, U.S. Steel generated at least half the billings in McKinsey's New York office. When the Wagner Act of 1935 required companies to negotiate with workers seeking better pay and safer working conditions, McKinsey set up a special unit to advise corporate executives on how to deal with their demands. But McKinsey eventually lost its biggest supporter at the steel company, and in the 1950s the two companies moved apart. 60 years later, the iconic steelmaker was floundering, and U.S. Steel's new chief executive, Mario Longhi, decided to restore their close relationship. The Brazilian-born Longhi became CEO of U.S. Steel in 2013. He inherited a company saddled with old, inefficient manufacturing methods. Smaller companies with newer technology had been gouging out big chunks of business from lumbering U.S. Steel, which had not turned an annual profit in years. Like Judge Gary, Longhi favored a mustache and opulence. He bought a mansion in Florida with 10 baths, a guest house, a separate gym, media room, and swimming pool. Longhi sold the complex for $9.8 million. He also owned property on Fisher Island, one of the nation's wealthiest enclaves, accessible off the Miami coast only by ferries, helicopter, or private yachts. Longhi had no experience with a big, fully integrated steel company. Most of his previous work experience was at Alcoa, but he knew people who could guide him, and that was his longtime trusted advisor, McKinsey Company.